So just to introduce myself, my name is Michelle and I work in MKC Communications. We're the PR agency for the Heritage Council. So we've looked after all the public relations and communications for the Heritage Council for the last 4 or 5 years, and in turn looked after Heritage Week as well. So we're going to do a very whistle-stop tour of kind of what PR can do for you in 30 minutes. Feel free to stop me at any stage to ask a question. Because it is very quick, but this presentation will be up online afterwards and be sent to you, so you can look at it then. So I suppose very briefly, what can PR do? It can raise the profile of your event, of your organisation, of heritage issues and the Heritage Council, I suppose, in general, and also increase attendance levels at your events if you're, I suppose, profiling your event in advance. So if we look at the media sector, it's very diverse, as many of you will know. From national news broadcasters to the print media, regional media, broadcast and print, and then online. As discussed this morning, we've tried to kind of, I suppose, look at how we can tap into online nationally by looking at partnerships with the journal.ie, and that's something that we're kind of going to focus on again for this year, because that's really the way journalist habits are going. They used to get press releases and stories by fax, sent in by us or by email. Now they go online. I suppose it's really important to emphasise that the Heritage Week website isn't just for people attending events. It's used by the media as well. So it's really important to get all your information up there and to make sure it's accurate and up to date. But to really use it as an opportunity and think of it as a portal that'll inform the media. Obviously your own website needs to be up to date as well, because if they see an event they might go on to look at your own website. But it is a great opportunity to use the Heritage Week website. Also, given there's so many events happening around the country, normally by the end of Heritage Week I'm pretty familiar with a lot of them. But if somebody rings me and they've got a query about County Tipperary and some events, I send them to the Heritage Week website as well. So I mightn't always have the information myself, but I know it's on the website. So just looking at kind of, I suppose, news values and what is news and what isn't. I suppose we're so involved in Heritage Week, we think it's big news. And while it is news, it's not news to everybody sometimes. And decisions are made depending on the editor or the journalist on the day. It's, tabloids versus broadsheet versus the national and regional. There's very differing views on what's newsworthy and what isn't. Often it's about what's unusual. So it's not that the man bites the dog, it's the dog bites man. If you can just keep that in the back of your head, it needs to be something different. We don't necessarily want controversial, that's not what Heritage Week is about, but we want something new and exciting, and also, I suppose, for local media, that local angle. So if we look just briefly kind of at how a story is created, and this is primarily really the national press, but just a very simple kind of, the journalists will hear about it. I send out kind of, I suppose, starting now with the registration, I start informing the media about Heritage Week and the dates and when it's happening. So they'll start kind of hearing about Heritage Week, and they'll do their research. They may call us, they may call you, the Heritage Council, they'll write their story. It gets sent into the section editor, and that's kind of where the journalist might lose kind of control of it. So it goes. They might have written a very nice 600-word article, but the space might be 300 words. So the section or sub-editor will just chop it. So it's very important when you're sending out your information that the most interesting bits are at the top, because often the journalist's story can get chopped. So I'm very easily chopped without being rewritten. So you could lose a lot if all your information is in your last paragraph. Again, the sub-editor will make changes, laying it out in the paper, the pages and the headline. So the journalist might have written a really nice headline, but the sub-editor can often change it. And that's why you'll often get people say, God, that headline isn't, if you'll see it yourself, the headline doesn't correspond sometimes with the article. You're saying, really? That's the headline they put on that piece? But it's because somebody else has put the headline on, not the person necessarily that has written it. And obviously then publication is read by solicitors, editor before going to press. So if we look at what makes a good story, you can ignore the conflict and controversy again, don't want to go there this time with Heritage Week. So a bit of novelty, something a little bit different. I was using the example of, I suppose, the event we heard about earlier, the Dig It event in Abbey Leaks, that it was new, it was different, it hadn't been done before. There's kids involved, really nice kind of hook of like kids getting out and exploring and digging up, I know it was the local, like the playground, but digging it up and seeing what artefacts they could find. It's a little bit different, it's not what happens every day of the week. Current affairs, maybe think about what's happening over the summer. Is there anything that you could tie your event into? Could you tie it into the local elections? Is there something maybe happening current affairs wise that you can tie it into? The human interest angle, again, that's something we all appreciate, the human interest angle. The local angle, again, spelling out what the local angle is. So the local paper may not realise that, you know, there's a local kids group involved, or that there's a local speaker coming, or, you know, again, it's just spelling it out a little bit. Sometimes you might think, but sure, they know that the speaker comes from down the road, but they mightn't. So maybe just spell out why he's interested in what the local angle is. Timeliness, again, for the gathering last year, I suppose a lot of events for Heritage Week would have focused on the idea of people coming home and ancestral heritage and stuff. So already, I suppose we've seen over the last year or two, there's a greater focus on 2016. So maybe, you know, what kind of, could you look at your event and the timeliness of what's happening kind of nationally, and bring that together. So regional newspapers, this isn't gospel, this is just kind of a general rule of thumb. You'll always find one paper that goes to print on a different day, but generally they're printed on a Tuesday and they're distributed on a Thursday. Print on Tuesday, distributed on Thursday. The deadline would be Monday morning for most news items, but we would always recommend, so if I wanted something to be in the paper this week, in a local regional paper I'm speaking about, I would have had to send it at the end of last week. So Friday is really the cutoff. When I say the deadline for Monday morning for news items, I mean like news, not, you know, proper news, whereas Heritage Week would be more kind of feature stories. So it's 1 or 2 weeks in advance kind of on the features of the local news stories. The local papers want the local angle, so spell it out for them, and they also love photographs. They have more space for photographs than the national papers. So looking very quickly at regional radio, so 3 million people listen to the radio, 2 million of which are listening to independent radio stations. There's over 20 regional-based radio stations, give or take a few that we've lost recently. And then community radio stations are getting increasingly stronger, because I think the number of volunteers working with community radio stations now, they're very, very enthusiastic and very proud, and they've dedicated quite a lot of time to it. So the community radio stations are really upping their game. A lot of the radio stations have newsrooms, some of the smaller ones wouldn't, to have massive newsrooms, and they take bulletins from the likes of UTV Radio or News Talk, who say would ring us on the Friday before Heritage Week and ask to do a quick soundbite, which is a quick little interview, which we will talk about later, with someone from the Heritage Council, and that would be syndicated out to loads of regional radio stations, so down to WLOR FM. So you might hear Michael Starrett, Chief Executive of the Heritage Council, speaking about Heritage Week, but actually you might hear it on 96 FM in Cork as well, and you're like, did he do all those interviews? But he hasn't. He's just done one, and it's been sent out to a couple of people. Just again, if you're ringing your local radio station, give them enough notice. Never ring them kind of 10 or 15 minutes before the hour or after the hour, because often the person preparing the news is the person reading the news, and they're the person answering the phone. So if you try and ring them at 3 minutes to 10, you'll get your head bitten off, because they'll be trying to get the news, and then they'll be going live on air to do the news, and then they'll be taking the call. So it's just kind of little things that help. You won't get your head bitten off, basically, because I've been there. Media toolbox. So for Heritage Week, these are kind of the things we're recommending that you can do. So diary notice, media invite. We'll go through each of these as well. Press release, a photo call notice or picture notice, radio interviews, and social media. So you've been to Denise's workshop at this stage. So the press release structure. So again, just very briefly, because you're familiar with this then, is your headline. It has to catch your attention. Often, I think I operate in Microsoft Outlook. So if you get your emails in an Outlook, you see the subject line, and you might see like 2 or 3 lines of the email. So if you don't read that, they're not going to open it. You know, if they don't read that bit and they're not caught straight away, they're not going to read it. And they're getting so many emails in and so many press releases about everything that it'll get missed. So it's really important that your headline catches attention. It's short, snappy. Get ideas from looking in the papers in the weeks running up to Heritage Week. See what kind of style the local paper is going for. And make sure your first paragraph, in 20-25 words max, tells the story. If you can't tell what your event is about in that many words, then you need to rethink how you're doing it. It should be very easy to do that. You don't need to get caught up into telling the detail of the times and who's for, but just enough to capture their attention. The middle can answer the kind of so what test. Why is it interesting? More detail about it. And then obviously the closing paragraph, you can put in any of the extra little details and the website address and stuff. The note to editor. Would anyone use kind of a note to editor on their releases that they issue? Yeah, it's really, really important. Every press release that I issue has a note to editor for every client. It's also called a boilerplate. So you might have heard people calling it a boilerplate as well. So for example, for the Heritage Council, we have a standard note to editor that goes on every Heritage Council release, which basically is a short paragraph, again, 25 words, 3 or 4 lines, that details what the Heritage Council is and who they are and what they do, what their remit is. So for the press release, you need to ask yourself, does your release answer the who, what, when, where and why? And it's really important to evaluate it when you've written it, to go back over and make sure it answers all those questions. Avoid your long words, your long sentences, and also the technical jargon. So I suppose there's a lot of, I've learned over the years, there's a lot of heritage experts, but for the lay person, you need to make sure they understand what the event is about. For some events are very technical and they're for heritage experts, and that's perfect during Heritage Week. But some of them are, targeted at the general public, so you need to make sure that the general public understand what the event is about. So remember who your audience is. You're also speaking potentially to tourists online. They could be reading the story, they could pick up the local paper in the accommodation they're staying in. So it's important to kind of give enough information that they understand. And ask yourself, what's the news hook? Why is it interesting? What's different about the event? You need to be able to sell your event to the media, so you need to know what that hook is. So you never send it as an attachment, you copy it into the body of an email. Attachments just often get blocked by the filters, and you just can't be sure that it's got through. Always BCC, never put the journalists in the CC. They like to think even though they know all the other papers are getting it, they like to think they're a little bit special and they're getting the story. And it's also, there's a data protection issue if you're circulating everyone's email addresses to each other. If you don't have the email addresses and you're wondering who to send them to, just ring your local paper and ask what the address for the news desk is. Or say to them, look, is there someone covering heritage? Or who's on at the moment? Always, as well, I wouldn't start ringing them now, because with holidays in August as well, it's better to ring them at the time of issuing and see who's around, because they could give you an address now and that person could A, have left, or B, be on holidays in August, and then your email will get missed. Don't put any logos in the press release. Again, some email filters can block the emails with graphics. And then your headline gets copied into your subject line and is also in your body of your release. Don't use read receipts, and make sure you follow up. So give a call a couple of hours later just to see if they've got the release. It might be an opportunity to say to them, look, do you need to talk to somebody else, or we have a photographer coming, or do you want to attend yourself? Or if nothing else, they have to look for your email and they might see it and then ultimately kind of read it. So pictures and videos. Some events would merit a full article, and there's a great opportunity for a whole story. Some events are more picture stories. They'd be a fantastic opportunity for the local paper for a picture, but it mightn't necessarily merit a full article. So you need to evaluate and see what your event fits, what kind of outlet. A photograph is a message, quite simply, but also it's a fantastic way of communicating and engaging with the reader. I think all of us will look at the paper and you look at the photos and they catch your attention straight away, more so than a big long article. But just be careful using props, things with logos. You really don't want too much branding in the photo. The local papers are a bit more lenient, but the national papers, definitely no branding, avoiding too many people in the shot. I'm going to break my own rule and show you shots with a lot of people in them, but normally 2 to 3 people max. So these are some photos from last year. The one on the left with Miriam McCallaghan was actually taken in the grounds of Dublin Castle at the launch. So again, we did like our suit photos, as we call them, with Miriam and the kids, but then we took them without, because the caption will explain that that's all about Heritage Week. The donkey was taken at an event last year. Again, there's a tiny bit of branding, but you see the way it's kind of in the back, it's not front and centre, but just kind of a cute photo. The top right, this was, I'm not sure where that event took place, but the little boy, I think it was actually his dad who was doing the weaving demonstration, and his mum had obviously just plonked him in, or someone had plonked him into the little basket. But a great photo, and just, nothing overly about it, saying it's Heritage Week, but it's very cute. And again, the one at the bottom right, that was an event, I think a tapestry event. And again, a lovely photo of atmosphere, just a bit of fun. I think it kind of epitomises Heritage Week events. They're just having great crack. And the caption again told the story. So just to look as well, these are photos from the national papers of the last few days. So I'm breaking my rules with more than 3 people, but on the far right, that's the Battle of Clontarf reenactment. So you can see that's different. That's like nearly 60, 100 people, I think, are in the actual main photo, and it's like they're charging in full costume at the camera. That was on the front page of the Irish Times. It's a fantastic picture. So looking very briefly at kind of interviews and radio and TV interviews. So the first thing, I suppose, is to always remember that you have an option to say yes or no. You don't have to do something. So if you're not ready, or if you get a call, I'd never just get caught into doing an interview straight away. I'd always say, just take your time, say to them, look, yeah, I just need to see who's available for that. I'll ring you back. What's your name? When do you want to do it? Number. Don't get suddenly caught up into being pulled into an interview straight away, because there's a certain amount of information you need to get beforehand about what's going to be covered. Are you being asked to speak on your own? Are you going on a panel? Is there somebody else going to be speaking? Is it a live interview? Is it a pre-record? If it's a pre-record, you have an opportunity to say, sorry, I just need to go back over that answer, or I'm not happy, or if you stumble, there's no big issue. If it's live, it's live. So you need to be well prepared for a live interview. We'd always recommend you go into studio if possible. It's not always possible, but it's just easier. I think everyone would say it's easier with face-to-face to have a discussion with someone. Over the phone, it can be a little bit more difficult. But if you are doing it over the phone, do it on a landline, because the mobile signal can drop for no reason. Even if I'm even just talking to someone across the courtyard, it can drop. So try and do a landline. But they will take a mobile if you've nothing else, but just try the landline. And again, just get as much information as possible beforehand, and then you can arrange a time for them to ring you back. So soundbite we mentioned very quickly. It's more something that the national stations do, where they will just want a little brief 30, 50 seconds clip. And you hear them on the news bulletins just about an event. So we would normally somebody from the Heritage Council would normally do a soundbite the night before Heritage Week, and that would go out to all the local stations and would go on News Talk. So it's very quick. It's 2 to 3 points. It's like that the week is happening tomorrow. Here's the website address, and there's X number of events happening. It gets literally that quick. So diary notice, photocall notice. It's really important to send these out to inform the media that your event is happening. So we would normally recommend that you send it out a week in advance, and then send a reminder 1 to 2 days in advance. So if Heritage Week was kicking off Saturday week, the 10th of May, I would say I'd send out my media invite diary notice this week, and I would then send a reminder next Thursday maybe, if I had an event on, say, the Saturday. Again, it's quite like your press release structure. You'll have a headline, you'll have a quick opening paragraph, and then literally I would, as basic, write down who, what, when, where, down the side of your page, and opposite it you write out who. So who, like if there's a particular speaker of interest, if there's going to be kids there, what is interesting about it, what event it is, where it's happening, and when. And on the when, if your event is happening from 12 to 3, but you know at 2 o'clock the main speaker is happening, or there's the photocall, say for example the Dig-It that we took, the Dig-It event downstairs, if the kids actually digging is happening at 2, but they're coming from 12 to 3, don't invite your media from 12 to 3. Invite them for 2, because they're not going to be able to stay around for 3 hours. They're going to be there for 10, 15 minutes max. Your contact details, again, a very small thing, but don't give a landline if the event is on Saturday and the office is closed. So very quickly, timelines. So remember that the local papers work a week in advance. You issue your media invite 1 to 2 weeks ahead. And if you're issuing a press release out on, say, Monday, you'd issue it prior to lunchtime. Later in the day, they're working on their stories. So if you're issuing something at 3 o'clock, it just won't get covered. It's too late. It might get covered a day or two later, but if you're sending it to broadcast in particular, you need to send it early in the day. For coverage the week before Heritage Week, so as the example I mentioned earlier, so if you want a story in your local paper the week before Heritage Week, you need to be issuing your press releases to your local papers by lunchtime Friday the 15th of August. So that's just a guideline. So very quickly, do's and don'ts. Be friendly to journalists. Consider the newsworthiness of your story. If you've 5 events over the course of Heritage Week, are they all as equally newsworthy? Maybe there's one really significant event that you invite media to, as opposed to trying to invite them to 5, and they don't really see that one was actually really interesting and they could have, that was the one they wanted. Remember who your audience is. Be realistic. Is it of national significance or regional significance? So for example, the Clontarf reenactment, that was obviously of huge interest to North County Dublin, but it had national significance as well. Gather all the information now. Start identifying who your spokesperson. So if there's a committee of people organising events, maybe now have a discussion about, well, who will do the media interviews, so that they have time to prepare. And next Saturday you're not going, oh God, we have an interview in 10 minutes, who'll do it? And everyone's running for the hills because nobody wants to do it. So give them time to prepare. Plan now. Get onto a local photographer. See if he'll give you a deal to do some press photography. Don't go for the local person who does weddings and communions and confirmations and doesn't do press, make sure you ask your photographer, do they issue to the local press, because they all have contacts as well. So you want to make sure you use the right person. And some quick don'ts. Don't delay. The deadlines are very tight for local and national media. Don't assume everything is newsworthy. You can't expect media coverage for everything. So pinpoint what you want to get media coverage and plan for it. If you're doing an interview, don't ever speculate or answer without knowing. It's like fully okay to say, I can't answer that. I'll refer you to the Heritage Council, or I'm really sorry, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out and I'll let you know. Don't ever fob off a journalist or ignore their inquiry. So if you get a request you really don't want to do, I've used the example of Joe Duffy all morning, so I might as well continue with him. Don't just ignore it. Go back and say, look, sorry, nobody's available. It's Heritage Week. You know, there's an event on. We just physically do not have anyone there. Because don't get pulled into something that you don't want to do. And then don't be afraid to say, I don't know. Because it's perfectly acceptable.